Good. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're here today to listen to Barbara Henning read from her recently published collection called Girlfriend. Barbara Henning was born in Detroit in 1948 and moved to New York City with her two children in 1983. After a few interim years in Tucson and Mysore, India, she returned to New York, presently living in Brooklyn. She is a poet who also writes prose. Her most recent book is a hybrid biography of her mother, Fern, a Detroit story. Actually, that's not her most recent book anymore. Now it's Girlfriend. Um, that Fern was named a Michigan Notable Book of 2023. She's the author of four novels, Just Like That, Black Lace, You, Me, and the Insects, and 30 Miles to Rosebud. Eight full-length collections of poetry, including Digigram, A Day Like Today, A Swift Passage, Cities in Memory, My Autobiography, Detective Sentences, Love Makes Thinking Dark, and Smoking in the Twilight Bar, as well as numerous chapbooks. Recently, a cross-country tour journal, Poets on the Road, published with Maureen Owen, was published by City Point Press. She is also the editor of the selected prose of Bobby Louise Hawkins and Looking Up Harriet Mullen. Finally, Barb is the author of the text prompt book, Experiments for Writing Poetry and Fiction. She is professor emerita at Long Island University in Brooklyn and teaches for writers.com. Barb, thank you so much for being here. I just read Girlfriend recently and I love it. I am confident you will all will love it too.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just sitting here because you put me on as co-host, and so people are asking to get in, so I'm letting them in.
Thank you.
So it's funny. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to be here too, and I'm going to start out. I'm going to read from Girlfriend. In the beginning, most of they're short pieces that last about a minute each, and then I'm going to read a few from as I get older later in the book, and then we'll stop. But first, I'm going to put a share screen up here. Where did that go? Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay. Wait a minute. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. Okay. Down here to put it over there. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Get back to the beginning of this. Okay. Each of the pieces I wrote on Girlfriend is about a girl, one of my girlfriends, and these are from childhood, the ones you're going to first, and many of them I have photographs with it. So the book is sort of written, I found the photographs and wrote them alongside, meditating on those. So they're really important. So I'm just going to do a minute slideshow with you to show you some of the photographs from the pieces we're going to read. I'm going to read, not you're going to read, but and then at the end, if you'd like, I could play it over again after you've heard me read them. Okay, so here. Okay. Is that music coming from my thing? I hope not.
I don't hear any music.
You don't. Oh,
It
that's
might
good.
be
I don't hear music either.
Oh, okay, so I hear music somewhere. Okay. Um, you probably recognize some of the photographs on there because I also was writing besides about my actual girlfriends, about literary women and girls who were really important to me, and also about mentors who were teachers, right, that had a big effect on me. So I'm going to begin reading. Really hear some music somewhere, but okay. Linda. Two infants in the arms of two sisters, two little girls at a big dining room table writing notes in a secret language. The streetcar rumbles past. Ude, uye, ave, aye, igrezze. Grandma smells a match. Under the covers, you and I hide from the one we love most. 8 years old and hitchhiking on Alter Road. She pulls us back inside. We are only playing, we insist. She gives us what we never had at home, orange juice and blueberry muffins. 10, 11, 12, we meet in the mall and on the street, and I admire your performance of all the swear words in one long stream. 67, you are the bride, I am the maid of honor. Hair in a bouffant, hair in a French twist, lace and violets, your garter, my garter, your marriage, my rebel, your drunk sailor, my sashaying pool shark, your little girl, my little girl, the suburbs, the city, office work, teacher work, many miles between us. But today you stretch out on my daybed, knitting little secret patterns, so adept with those needles, the scarf flowing over the edge of the bed and onto the floor. You look up at me, writing in my notebook. You and Bobby, you say, could always read so fast. Brenda and the twins. You lived in a household of women with your mother and grandmother. The twins lived in the house between ours. They were a little younger than we were. A cashier at food fair, their mother came home, made dinner, and while we were in the woods kissing Larry and starting little forest fires all day long, the twins had chores. We never went inside each other's houses. That was uncommon in the neighborhood. Instead, we carried on outdoors. Once we tore into each other with our nails because you said my father was an ass. Sometimes we'd go behind the garage with our dolls or in a tent and we'd play doctor. The twins' father was a big man like a giant in a white dress shirt. When he told me they couldn't come out, he'd stand at the screen door and look down at me sternly. I'd turn around on my heels and go home, not so sure about ever coming back. I see what's happening. I have to turn off this thing, slideshow. Okay. Sorry, that's where the music was coming from. Dot. We walked to Grant Junior High School together. Our houses were squat with unkempt yards inside chain link fences. Both houses with a gang of kids inside running wild. Tall and short, Barb and Dot. Middle school hoodlums in mind only with black short boots and tight skirts. I stole pantyhose from the dime store. You had an allowance. Huddled together in your bedroom, we stitched up the seams of my skirt, turned me into someone else. Soft brown hair, now a wild nest smoothed over with hairspray. Thick black eyeliner. Two motherless girls. Mine died under an oxygen tank, yours in the basement when a camp stove exploded. Stepmother soon to arrive. I remember yours lounging around in her nightgown in the daytime with a glass of wine. 13 years old and arm in arm, preparing each other for the day ahead. When we walked down 9 Mile Road, it was touch me, but then don't dare touch me. Cinder Girl. I was a fighter. I fought with my stepmother, and my sisters were not my stepsisters. They were just like me. I did sleep in an attic room like yours, and so did my sisters, and we wore old clothes, hand-me-downs, not rags like yours. I would talk to my mother and pray to her, but no miracles, no magic birds, no golden shoes. When you grow up, dear, my mother said, you will have plenty of love and kisses. She meant a husband. I went for the plenty. In my bed in the attic by the hallway light, I read book after book, discovering utterly different worlds. But the problem was how to get away, run away. One day, a good-looking James Dean with a tendency toward petty crime came along in his souped-up car, then another and another, but now I'm here with my words, my body, and a big oak tree swaying in the wind. You, however, remain forever on the covers of many books, miraculously beautiful, sitting by the side of your prince. Laura. When I think of you, I remember endless, frightening winter. You and your family barely protected from predators, the fierce wind, and that enormous, empty, frozen, snowbound prairie. As a child in a suburb of Detroit, I could hear the same wind outside my window, and I'd feel the same burn on my cheeks as I walked in the freezing cold, still dark in the morning, on my way to school, traffic minimal back then, the car lights shining on the snow as they passed me by. I had no doubt when I opened the door to our house that the floor would be warm and at dinner time there would be food. Your family would sing together, loving, even when wolves were howling outside a roughly built house without doors or windows. While eating only bread and tea, I wonder if you weren't sometimes a little impatient or irritated. Maybe a strap and a whack now and again. When it was bitter cold and your mother put you in a dress and scolded you, or the time she told you it was impolite for little girls to interrupt, you must have bit your lip or growled just a little, didn't you? That was Laura Ingalls from Little House on the Prairie. Cindy, you were the girl my mother wanted me to be. Get your Bible badge, follow the Girl Scout laws, be loyal, helpful, a friend to Girl Scouts and animals, obedient, thrifty, cheerful, clean in thought, word, and deed. Some afternoons I do my algebra homework with you. Your sister had an Elvis Presley poster on the bedroom wall, and she had taken a bus to see his house, you said. Secretly, I used to gloat over your uncool innocence. You must have known. Once you took me to youth night at the Baptist church. When the preacher called everyone forward, all the teenagers started crying and gathering on stage. I sat in the middle of a row of empty folding chairs. I'm a Lutheran, I whispered. You kneeled, and then the men took you into the back room. I never knew what happened there, but you seemed pleased when you returned to your seat. When we were students at the university one day, we passed on Cass Avenue and we stopped to say hello. Mrs. Meyer, I wrote my first poem in your class. I was in 10th grade. We didn't read much poetry in school. At home, there was only a childcraft book of poems and a book by Longfellow. I read many of the books in the school library, but no poetry. You taught us how to write haiku, and the day after I brought my poem to class, you read it out loud. Something about a falling leaf. In autumn, I used to lie under the maple tree in our yard and watch the leaves fall. Probably something simple like just a gentle breeze and the maple leaf breaks loose, falling, fleeing, gone. Something indicating gone, since I had not seen my mother for 4 years, then fleeing because I counted the days until I could leave home. Eventually, I did leave and I became a poet, but I wrote my first poem in your class, Marilyn Meyer. Louisa. Jo March, my favorite character of yours, was boyish and independent, a lot like you. As a young girl, I cried when her sister Beth died. You also lost your sister and you called her Beth. Rereading today, I cry again. When my mother was ill, she warned us of her coming death. We weren't quiet with her grief like Jo. Instead, we wept and wailed. Not my father, though. He rarely shed a tear, stoic, surely frightened at his future with 4 children. Children should not have to experience death, so they say, and yet it's everywhere. A dog crushed by a truck, a dead bird, a grandfather in a casket. a tree struck by lightning, all these snowy days, the trees leafless, and then the next generation repopulates. We shut the book, wipe away the tears, do our homework, and snuggle down under our blankets and fall asleep. Eileen, we used to skip school and sit in Henry's drugstore, smoking together and talking about our missing parents, perhaps our boyfriends, our hair. You lived on 9 Mile Road in an old farmhouse still standing in a neighborhood of 1950s cinder block houses. You weren't allowed guests. The shadowy figure of your grandmother would appear from behind the door watching you and calling your name. Come inside, Eileen. You were slim, the lines in your face and body very noir, long dark brown hair, olive skin, dark black eyeliner. You appeared in East Detroit High in the 12th grade. You didn't do well in school. You smoked and worked at White Castle. I'd wait for you in front of your house and then we'd walk to school together. I saw you once after graduation. You were living with a guy, some secret there. The color orange comes to mind. Maybe that was the color of the vinyl sofa in your apartment. The ceilings were low. The bedroom door was closed. It was dark. Sometime later, I invented an imaginary world in a novel, and you were at the center, intertwined with my double. Catherine, as a young girl, I used to dream about you and the moors, the craggy hills and storms. Your losses reminding me of my own vulnerability to the winds of circumstance. Like me, your mother died early in life. Your stepbrother was motherless too. Neither of you loved as children. The love between you and he was like a return to the safety of the womb. I am Heathcliff, you once said. He's always in my mind as my own being. Dying in childbirth, you left behind a daughter. For a while, she was subject to her uncle's cruelty, but eventually she boarded up that gloomy Wuthering Heights and married her cousin. A happy ending. What a relief. I used to plot my escape in my diary, imagining lovers and counting the days until I could leave. Meanwhile, I was lucky to have my sisters in the next room and my brother downstairs. The Bronte children barely lived past 30, but they relied on each other too for their survival. Janet. We took the bus together to and from school, a black coat wrapped around your thin body. We huddled in a corner in the attic in your run-down house, a block away from mine, smoking your mother's cigarettes. She drinks, you said, rolling your eyes. Little girls in every room. Your mother asleep on the couch. You bleached my hair platinum blonde to my father's dismay. Our favorite spot was the bowling alley. We drank coffee, ate French fries, and cussed out the waitress. How old are you girls? You got to be 18 to smoke in here. Your father would show up once in a while in a big car wearing a fancy suit. He'd leave the girls a box of candy. The drive-ins, you in the front seat with your boyfriend Jim, I'm in the back with Peasy. The lighted screen over the parking lot, catching it now again from a horizontal position. At 5 to 11, my father was waiting at the door with a list of questions about the movie. What could he do? Nothing. I was on my way out. And then I'm moving into the next section. Marlene, we didn't confide in each other. We weren't close. We'd cruise the drive-ins in your red Mustang and go to parties together, searching for the boys we'd hook up with next. At a Christmas party in 66, I met a guy who I ran away with a few months later. Broke my father's heart, although back then I wasn't quite sure he had one. After we children were gone and grown, he and my stepmother moved into a new house and bought a boat. One day you came along to watch him pull me over Lake St. Clair on water skis. I was treading water and holding my hand up to say stop, but he kept plowing forward, perhaps distracted by your curvy body in a bathing suit. He might have run me over, except in the nick of time, you tapped him on the shoulder. I still remember the look on your face when he cut the engine and swerved the boat around me. Sharon, I pulled my new car over to the curb in front of your house and honked. After you opened the door, you turned and waved to your mother standing on the porch. She was a short, stout woman with big arms like my grandmother. We'd glide in and out of the drive-ins talking to boys. Your mother wasn't angry when you came home late. I imagined you talking to her about everything. Your life seemed safe to me. We didn't confide in each other, and yet there was something tender about you that I always liked. I trusted you. After I ran away from home, you had a job in a bank on Gratiot Avenue, and you'd pass money to my little sister so she could call me. Later, you married your boyfriend, and with a few days' notice, you were flown to Germany to stay with him while he was in the military. We wrote a few letters, but I couldn't find you after that because I didn't know your married name. Kathy. You used a big, thick needle and a chunk of ice to pierce my ears. Close your eyes, you said, as you initiated me into womanhood. When I first met you, you were 18 years old. Married at 14, you already had 4 children. Your husband was a construction worker, a close friend of the guy I was living with. They ordered us around, get a beer, do this, do that. A few years later, I was selling lemonade in a concession on the waterfront. Eerie Armenian music was broadcasting over the loudspeakers. The clouds were dark, threatening rain, and only a few people on the midway. Suddenly, you appeared walking along with a bag of books. You had just started college, you said with a gleam in your eye. You were going to become a lawyer. You had left your husband, and your mother was watching the children. Donna. For a while, we were roommates in an apartment on Manistee Street on the east side of Detroit. When you and your baby came home from the hospital, I was sleeping on the couch. Across the alley in my former apartment, my ex-boyfriend was sleeping with another girlfriend. You dressed up in a negligee, and I took photos to send to your husband in Vietnam. Late into the night, we talked about your Jim and my new boyfriend, just home from the Marines. Forget your ex, you said. Get married and have a baby with the guy outside in the car. I used to take care of your baby, but now I only remember a photograph with cereal on his face. I've tried to find you many times, but I only knew you by your husband's last name, and his phone number long ago was disconnected. When we women marry again and again and keep moving further into the suburbs, finally we disappear. Linda. I was working as a secretary in a data processing department at Chatham Supermarkets. You were working for a travel agency in Southfield. We were roommates in a flat in Madison Heights. You were reading about hypnosis. One day you asked me to sit on a stool while you tried to hypnotize me, swinging back and forth a rose birthstone on a chain. Your boyfriend was there too. I was on the verge of tears. We went to a club with fake ID and I had a panic attack. I never could handle alcohol. I crouched down on the floor in the back of the car. I remember telling you that your boyfriend couldn't be there all the time. There was only one bedroom. We must have lived together for a couple of months before you left with him, and I moved back into the city for a new job. When I look for you now on Facebook, lo and behold, you are a psychologist. Lucy, you were tall, slim, and black. We used to go out to lunch together. You worked in accounting at Fagel Pop, and I was the secretary for the sales manager. You lived at home with your family, and I was sharing a flat with a roommate on the outer drive. We both rode the bus to work. After I inherited my grandfather's old Dodge, sometimes I'd drop you off at home. I remember how you would slide down low in the seat so no one could see you as we drove through the neighborhoods. Sometimes instead of eating lunch, we'd go to Hudson's department store. Sometimes you show up in my dreams when I'm back in that office. We once imagined going on a trip together down south where you had relatives, but this was 69, not long after Martin Luther King was assassinated, and we were afraid to drive out of the city in the same car together. But I remember we imagined it and then decided not to. Susie, when you came to stay with me, I was living on Alter Road. right down the street from where my mother had grown up. I remember you sitting on the sofa, very pregnant, waiting. Your father had kicked you out of the house. Your brother was my boyfriend, and even though we were taking a break from each other, he asked me to help you out. I would come and go to work and back, and there you'd be sitting on the sofa looking out the window. I must have cooked for you. One day you left a note saying you were on your way to the hospital. I went out with some friends from work to a bar in Hamtramck and stupidly let a guy I met into the apartment. When I asked him to leave, he refused. He held me down with his hand on my throat, and I lay there as still as possible. Afterwards, I pretended everything was normal. Did he want something to eat? After he left, I stood at the window in the dark and watched him drive away. The strange thing is, a fire had started in the house across the street. Flames were coming out of a window on the top floor. Moments later, the fire department arrived. I stood there in the dark watching. A few days later, you came to pick back to pick up your things. I didn't tell you about him. I didn't tell anyone. I was frightened he might return, and I was worried your brother would discover. I don't know where you are now or what happened to the baby. I moved on. We all moved on. And then I'm going to read one more from this earlier time. What time is it? How long have I gone? How long have I gone?
It's 7:30, but we started a few minutes late, so you've got time.
Okay. Maybe I won't read some of the later ones. I'll just read this one. This one's interesting. Okay, Faye, this is a little longer. You were seated on a stool and students were sprawled around the room, some at desks, some on the floor. You were silent for a few minutes. You had us write about a stone that you had placed on a table. Some of the students read what they had written. I was too shy to read out loud back then, and I was relieved you didn't call on me. The semester assignment, you said, was to choose an object we could carry around and write several poems about it. After class, I went directly to my counselor and dropped the class. Then I went to the bookstore to buy some of the books on your syllabus, including Soap by Frances Pong and your book, A Man as a Hook, Trouble, poems with fictional truth-telling narrators, and your surreal pointillism drawings, e.g., a man's headless body with penises erupting from every orifice. My friend Sally took classes too, and she said you were one of the best teachers she ever had. The other day ago in an online class, a student in Hawaii was talking about a teacher from whom he'd learned a lot about poetry, and it was you. You moved to Hawaii in 1980, and you're still there. For a while after your workshop, I carried an object, a bobby pin, around with me and took notes in my journal. My mother used to snap pink rolls into my hair with bobby pins. During World War II, a striped man rode the buses, collecting unhinged hairpins and donating them for the war effort. A little thing can become a big thing, even if we aren't aware of it. Kind of did that kind of move with this one because a little thing can become a big thing. Even though I dropped her class because I was so shy, I thought, you never know. I became a poet, So um, anyhow, she was a wonderful teacher who I didn't get to get. I'm going to read one more, and it's one with Sean mentioned that I went on this road trip, and there's a book that Maureen and I did about it. We traveled all over the country reading we went from New York City. She traveled from Denver over to meet me, and then we went all the way down and around the coast, up to California, back to Denver. I think about 15 readings we did. Maureen, in 88, Lewis asked you to write a blurb for my first book, Smoking in the Twilight Bar. Over the years, we hung out at poetry readings in New York, Tucson, and in Boulder. While we were teaching for Naropa, we talked on the phone for hours. The years before the pandemic in our 70s, both with grown children and grandchildren, we circled the country on a reading tour. I taught you yoga, and even though I tried to be optimistic, I had to keep up with you, especially in Albuquerque, where my lungs didn't like the altitude, the cold air, and the dirty hostel where we were staying. I couldn't breathe. and you helped me carry things upstairs. You could stay up all night talking about poetry. Once we sat in the Walmart parking lot making tempeh tuna sandwiches on a cutting board and we laughed at ourselves. Problems? Sure. Someone was always in a hurry. Someone was irritable. Someone was snoring. Someone forgot to take a photo. Someone said something to hurt the other. Someone needed to be alone. Someone was cold and there weren't enough blankets. Someone worried about what was going on at home. But look at that mountain, that cloud formation, the wind turbines, those poor cows corralled like that. Clink, clunk. Someone's shoulder caught in a cramp. Someone wants to eat real food. Someone wants to kill the bully. But someone is a pacifist. Someone needs to write alone. Someone needs to be alone. Now I call you up if I can't think of the right word. I say that all my relatives died around my age, and you advise that's not the way to think about it, Barb. I had trouble sleeping, but you could fall asleep anywhere. 2 months in a car and 15 poetry readings later, at the end of the trip, I was camping out in the room in your basement. When I went upstairs to ask you a question, you were in a U shape on the sofa, sound asleep. Another time, you were leaning on your mother as she gazed out the window, sound asleep. What a gift to be able to sleep like that. Thank you. And do you want me to show the slideshow again or no? Yes. Okay. Hold on. Let's see if I can find it now here. Are we still? Oh, first I have to make, yeah, there it is. Okay. I have to share the screen. I have to go, there it is. Okay. And I have to drag it over here and hit it. Okay. So that's my cousin, who was the first one I wrote about. And this was her and I when we were older. And I was standing up. These are my neighbors, the twins. And this was Brenda. That's from the one Brenda and the twins. This is Dot and me, Grant Junior High School. This is Laura Ingalls. And this is Cindy and me. We were in the drama club or something. Mrs. Myers, who helped me with my poetry. And that's Emily Bronte. And this is my friend Janet. Marlene, who went on the boat with me, and this is Sharon, who I've been in touch with since actually. And that was Griffin and me, and that was my friend Kathy, who pierced my ears. This is Donna and her baby, I can't find still. And this is Linda Calder. That's Faye Kicknessway, my teacher. And this is Julie Christiva, who I didn't read, but she was a great book on depression. This is Maureen and me from years before the trip. And this is Julie. She did the cover for the book. She did the image of on the cover. Okay. So now I can drop that down. Let me make sure it's off. Yeah. Okay. Now I can turn on that off. Come back. Okay.
Barb, thank you so much. I loved reading this and I loved hearing you read it. There were moments when I first read it that felt like epiphanies, and I had the same experience hearing you read it. I laughed really hard in Cinder Girl when you say, when you grow up, dear, my mother said, you will have plenty of love and kisses. She meant a husband. I went for the plenty. I laughed out loud. I laughed so hard at that.
I
Um,
know when I read it, people laugh too. So
It's so funny. And then the end of Donna also gutted me. When we women marry again and again and keep moving further into the suburbs, finally we disappear. I thought that was so, so moving. There are so many like little epiphanies in all of these. It was such a pleasure to read. We're gonna move into a Q&A. So if any of you have thoughts or questions for Barb or anything that you want to say, feel free to. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, or if you don't want to be on the recording, because we are going to upload this to YouTube afterward, feel free to use the chat function and I'll read your question for you. But does anybody have any thoughts, questions for Barb?
I have something. My name's Rodney Benton. And Barbara, I enjoyed you reading, hearing you read it. That added.
Oops, we lost you, Rodney. Oh, too bad. I think he's picking up from a phone or something.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
All thumbs when it comes to my smartphone. But anyway, I was added something. It added a nice touch hearing you read it. And the one that really impacted me or brought made me overly verklempt, it brought tears to my eyes was Louisa, the one about see my mom's mom died when she was 12. And so it was very touching to read that one. I enjoyed, the other ones too. I haven't quite finished yet. But anyway, so and I can tell that from your book that running away from home and your mom dying, so and that you were sort of you were tough. You had determined and dependent, and yet over the years, I don't know, you always had that gentleness to you too. That's the thing I noticed. But anyway, I enjoyed the reading.
Thanks, Rodney. Rodney's taken many of my classes, so I like hearing your voice because we only talk over the internet, right? I mean, over and writing.
I have a question just about the genesis of the book. Like, did you always have a book in mind, or with these poems written over time? If you could just talk a little bit about the
Yeah.
how it came to be.
Well, a long time ago, I wrote some of these early ones, sketches. I had finished a book or a project. I don't remember which one, but it was a long time ago. And I thought, I was thinking about my early girlfriends and I wrote some sketches. And then I thought, I don't know, I just didn't think it was working. It probably wasn't something I could write at the time because I needed to have more distance on it. Did you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so,
Hmm.
but I did keep them in a file. And when I finished writing the book about my mother that Sean was talking about, where I imagined my mother's life, actually, I had to imagine it because she only lived till I was 11, right? So, um, and then I pulled those out and I just started writing them and rewriting them and writing them. And then it just grew. I
Yeah.
went to read them at a place in Brooklyn, Nameable Books. And everybody liked them. I was reading with my friend Maureen. And so I got a lot of feedback from my friends, my poet friends, saying they liked them. And that worked. And then somebody came up to me right after that reading and volunteered said they were interested, Hanging Loose. She was one of the editors. She wanted to publish some in her journal. And then very shortly she said they talked and they wanted to publish the book when I finished it. And I had only written about 15 of them. So
Wow.
that
You
was pretty
um
cool,
you
actually.
it's I you just have such a gift for that kind of character sketch in poetry. So loved the reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I don't know your poetry, and just because I'm new to your poetry, and I'm not uh, I'm not schooled in poetry, but first the idea of the idea of it. I like the idea of walking through the girlfriends, the women, girls of a life. And then so amazing that I have such a sense of the from just the poems you've read, and it's obviously not the whole book of through these interesting sketches or memories or paintings of these individual uh, people in your life. I also get this picture of the person who's talking. So it's super interesting. And then that I don't want to take up too much space. The poem about the rape or the
Mhm.
boy and the fire, very uh, memorable and striking. And and your tone throughout it just, I mean, it's just unembellished fact. I mean, not in any kind of like list form. It's, it's got this nice kind of discursive way of unfolding. But that the understated nature and the fire, that you watch after it happens was just a very uh, chilling and moving poem.
Yeah, I never read that one before, and I got to it, and I have to say, I thought, oh, I shouldn't have read this one. I actually thought that because, and then as I read it and I got toward the end of it, I felt teary actually by reading it, and I didn't expect it. And the odd thing about that one is, um, I wrote this. My first book is called Smoking in the Twilight Bar. And it's a collection of somebody, say, witnesses. Charlie Baxter wrote a blurb for the back, and I was reading it recently, and he was my teacher, and he said, that it was this witness. I was this witness, this voice of a witness. And I wrote about that same event in a poem in that book, and it's different. It's very different than me talking to somebody about it. The woman who was on my couch and was having a baby. So girl, really a girl. So yeah, it was kind of like the life of a working class girl in Detroit who is lucky enough to have been raised to be very literate. And so that was, yeah, a time.
I had a very similar experience as you did, Janice, while reading it. I thought it was really interesting that Barb, so often you're like at the periphery, or as you said, you are like a witness in these vignettes. Like you are more the camera lens than the center of the action. And yeah, I felt like I knew you so much better after having read it. And it's so interesting to write that it's like a memoir and you're not even the subject most of the time, right? But I still know you by the end of the book in a way that I didn't before.
Yeah, I was reading, somebody was writing about memoir for this class I'm teaching now. And I went back to read something from another class that I had used. And he was talking about how typically in a memoir you write about other people. And I thought, oh, that's interesting because most of them are really self-focused. But we are really a composite, I believe, about people that we're with, we learn language, we learn how to speak by talking to other people, we internalize all these other people, and that's who we are, and that's our story, right, in a way. But we get cooked on the eye too much. But even, I mean, really, there's a lot of me in that book, uh, so I see Norma Cook is here. She's one of my girlfriends. Maybe she can't talk. She's just staying in the background there. So, okay. Anybody else have something they want to ask me about? I'm also a teacher, so I can ask. And Heather's there. I know Heather. No questions?
I'm curious to know about your process with how you arranged the poems in the book. I know a lot of it is fairly chronological, but I'm curious if there were any decisions you had to make either within the sections or and like the poem about your mother comes towards the end of the book, for example, and that was obviously a very intentional decision. So I'm just curious if you had any thoughts about
Well,
that.
I tried because a lot of my friends are friends for my life, and they might have been a friend when I was very young. So I'm going to be talking about them throughout. I'm in the poem, I'm young and I'm old. And and so that throughout the idea of really trying to be too um, focused on what happened first and second and third, right? But sort of, I wanted to sort of swim a little bit in that way of getting older, even though it was looking back and forth everywhere. And as I went along, I never knew where I was going to put my mother, my sisters, and my daughter And I knew they didn't fit in with the other things because they're my whole life, really, even though my mother was only 11 and she's woven through there. And so it just struck me that I should put them at the end. And then when I was meeting with one of the editors of Hanging Loose and Dick Lowry, who's a poet too, and he's such an excellent editor, and we had great discussions throughout the whole process of him finding every little error possible. And he suggested putting the sections in to help people have a break. And I didn't want any words in the section. And so I said the only thing I could think of is to trace my age with some of the photographs. And then I went through and took out other photographs of me with people because I felt it was getting too heavily my photographs. And I found one photograph that I'd never seen. It was in a negative, you know that I used in there. It was a second one of the sections. Yeah. And I saw it, I thought, who was that? And I realized it was me. Any other questions?
Can I say something?
Sure.
Barbara, this is Heather. This was
Heather. Hi,
really
Heather.
beautiful of how you wove all these stories together, giving us time frame, sort of bringing us in time and through time, and yet it was all circular. It was not like, even though these events happened, and you said you brought your family in at the end, I just felt this swirling of love and a very circular kind of telling of the stories. And I was also very, very moved by bringing this forward about women and our friends and the difficult things and things that can't be spoken and things that are spoken. Thank you so much for doing this work. It's very inspirational, I think, to all of us.
Thank you, Heather. I was just reading this review. Mary will know about, but it's of a book that came out about Joe Brainerd. And he wrote these poems called I Remember. And I didn't even think about it, how this is related in some ways to Joe Brainerd's book, where he had I remember this, I remember that, I remember that. But they're mixed up too, like that. But and they're following time order in a way, but in a mixed up way. But there's each one separate. They're not woven together like mine are woven together. And yet you experience them all together. And I was thinking, because I always think of it as a kind of collage of consciousness, and I'm constructing it, really. First I'm having the memories and then I'm having them in different orders and I change them around. I don't want them to follow chronological. I want it to be more like how the mind could move from one thing to the next. And I'm doing that as a kind of fiction in a way, that because I'm constructing it that way, and it's not the way I thought it. And if we had to follow like memoir exactly as we did something, we'd have to take everything. Nothing would work in it because we're always kind of writing fiction. So, and yeah, Dorothy, I'm glad to see you here. Dorothy Friedman, nice to see you. Okay. Anybody else have a comment or a question or anything? Dorothy, you got to unmute. Dorothy, you no sound.
I took your workshop and I really enjoyed it. And one of the things that I noted before, you're talking about this book, but just the amazing way that you weave realism and surrealism in the same poem. It was very fascinating to me at that point, and your workshop was quite marvelous, I think.
That was a chronology of mine years ago at the Poet's House, right? Or was it the one I did for the poetry project?
No, well, it was for the poetry project, but it was actually in the basement of City Lore.
Yeah.
If that's what you referring to. But I guess
Yeah,
I was
that
really
was,
interested in the photos as well as the narrative that you read, the narratives. So did you like have a file of these photos from early, like adolescence
I
or?
did get a little box camera when I was young and I took some of the photos, but yeah, a couple of the photos of my siblings I took. But yeah, no, I saved photos whenever I got them from people. And a few people gave me other photos once like the poem I read about, I call it like prose poems or whatever you want to call them. Um, I wrote about Sharon and I talked about losing her. And then while I was writing this, you see, I didn't want to use people's photographs if I could find them without having their permission. And that was a whole interesting experience because I found a lot of people. And if I didn't find the person, I didn't use their last name. Um, I don't know if I used her last name or not. I can't remember. Only if she would have said it was okay to use it. And so a few people she gave me oh no, I already had a good photo of her, but a few people gave me photos, but really I'm a very organized person, so I keep everything all the years by. I
That's
couldn't do all the
great.
things I do if I wasn't extremely organized, that's for sure.
I know what that can be like if you're not as organized, because I'm not that organized. I have a photography archive of the fellow that was my partner for 25 years, and it still needs more
Yeah.
work, but I keep discovering more and more photos in it from the 80s and 90s in the Lower East Side, actually. But focusing back on your book, and I think you mentioned this, or somebody else mentioned it about the overlap of the lives, how there's the interconnectedness between. I mean, I don't remember in exact detail, but that's well, some of them said they were poets, that they were going to be poets, or they were working on poetry, and it just gives you a sense of community and the continuity of women's lives, of people's lives, really, I guess.
Yeah, if you read the book, it's there people show up like in the thing about Faye Kicknessway, the poet Faye Kicknessway. I mentioned a friend, Sally. Well, Sally shows up later in one, and there's this kind of overlapping that happens of people in the book, you
Yeah,
know.
I really like that a lot.
And I get older, of course, I have friends who are poets, and I got to know Diane DePrima, and I write about her, and so yeah. So now I'm writing boys and men, which is another thing I decided to do. And it's
Mhm.
very, very different. It's a very different thing because my relationship with men is very different than with women. So, yeah, I've written about 15 of those so far, more now, maybe 20. So,
Do you want to say any more about that, or you want us to wait with bated breath when we actually
yeah,
get
sometime I'll read from them here.
right?
And I have enough of them. No, I'm going to read from them in Brooklyn in September when I read at the Lofty Pigeon.
Oh,
So
great.
she's in New York too. Dorothy's in New York. So any other questions, anybody? Thank you all for coming. Um, it's really great. We're reading for a number of people who I don't know, which I'm like excited about. So
I'll give people a minute if they have any final questions. And in the meantime, I'm going to put a few different links in the chat for you all. The first link is Barbara's book, Girlfriend, which you should all buy if you haven't already. Every poem is just as good as the poems you heard now. Please buy it. There's also a link to Barbara's website if you're interested in just her other work or her other books. And then I'm linking the 4 upcoming courses that she has with writers.com. She has Poetic Prose, the prose poem, coming up on September 3rd. I've taken that class. It is a treasure of learning. If you're interested in prose poetry, I highly recommend it. Well, I recommend all these, but I've actually taken that one, so I can confirm that it's very good. She has Flash Fiction, writing the short story on November 19th. And then next year, she has The Watching Eye, Thinking Mind, Writing Flash Fiction. That's on February 4th, 2026. And then if you're interested in also writing a poetic memoir, Barbara's teaching the poetic memoir on April 22nd of next year. So if any of those interest you, please enroll. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at writers@writers.com. Are there any final questions or thoughts?
All the workshops sound really great, actually. I want to take all of them. I know I won't get to do that, but it's
Thank you, Barbara. That was lovely. It was
Thank
nice to hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. Norma, are you there? No. I guess she's just listening.
Barb, thank you so much.
Okay.
Wonderful to see you. Wonderful to hear you.
Okay. Great. See you in a couple of weeks.
See you in a couple of weeks. Everyone, take care. Have a good night. Stay cool.
Bye. Bye, Rodney. See you soon in class. Heather, bye. Everyone. Lynn, Robin,
bye, Barbara.
Susan, Dorothy, Heather. Okay, bye. You can cut us off if you want, Sean.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.